number is 25,550 days. Anybody have a wild guess what 25,550 is? What is that number? The average lifespan, if you live to be 70 years old, you will have 25,550 days. Now that's if everything goes well. And that's 70 years old if you get to that point. So now what's interesting is if you take that whole thing and you take all the activities of our life, all the things that we do throughout a lifetime, it boils down to this, that if you live that many days, on average, the average person will spend 23 years of your life sleeping. Some of you maybe a little bit more than that. That you will spend an average of 17 years of your life working. You'll spend 11 years of your life watching TV and playing. A little bit more than that for some of you. Maybe that and work are reversed for a couple of you. You'll spend 6 years of your life traveling, moving, and going around. Now, if you're in Chicagoland, that's probably going up because it's just time in the car, just getting around has got to be more than that. You'll spend 6 years of your life eating. You'll spend 2 years of your life just getting ready for something, going somewhere, doing something. You'll spend 1 year of your life going to church. Now, you take all of those things and you say, all right, that sleeping, eating, working, playing, watching TV, going to church, doing good stuff, getting ready, traveling around. All of those things, if you invest your life that way, the average person will say, I lived a pretty successful life. I lived okay. I did all right. I spent my life like everybody else does on average. My question for you today is that really successful? Does that really measure up to what success really is? Do you walk away from a life like that, where you tally up all like that, and you get to the end of your life and you say, yeah, I was a success in my life? I learned many years ago that there are 3 alternatives that we can do with our lives. There are really only 3 things that we can do with our lives. We can either spend our lives, just spend it sleeping, eating, driving, getting ready, going to church, coming home, doing those kinds of things. You can spend your life, or you can waste your life, which a lot of people do that. They just kind of it gets frivoled away. Or the third option is that you can invest your life. You can make an investment with the 25,550 days that you have on average. You can invest that in something that matters for eternity. And I would propose to you today that the greatest use of your life, the greatest use of my life, is to invest it in something that will outlast it. That's called leaving a legacy. That's where you leave a legacy. Now, a lot of people look at a lot of different ways that they leave a legacy. Everybody wants to be remembered for something. You want people long after you're gone to never forget who you were, what you were all about. A lot of people do different kinds of things in order to try to ensure that would take place, that they would leave a legacy, that they would leave their mark, they make some kind of significant contribution. Some people will write a book. And so they'll have a book that will be in a library forever, and it'll be part of the library of time, and people will come back for years and generations later. Some people might put it together in a work of art. It might be a CD or some kind of music format or some kind of artistic expression that will get hung up somewhere, and you hope that will last long after you're gone. Some people will build big buildings. If you go downtown Chicago, you see this guy by the name of Trump that built this big building. He's got his name up there, and he wants to make sure that you don't ever forget, long after he's gone, that I was here because I built this building. Or some people give major gifts to an organization or an institution so they can have their name on a little plaque that will go up somewhere. So anybody that comes into that building and that institution, that organization for generations to come will say, oh, so-and-so was here. So-and-so was dedicated to this. Most of us intend to leave some kind of legacy through our kids. And so we have kids, and we think that our lives will hopefully somehow live on through them. So we think about our legacy in those terms. Now, it's interesting what the Bible says. There's a verse in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7. It says this. It says that good people will be remembered as a blessing. Good people will be remembered. Their legacy will continue on. They will be remembered, thought out for generations to come as a blessing. Now, this past week, I was in St. Louis for a few days, and I had an opportunity to tell the story of Lifeline Christian Church. I was meeting with college students and telling them a little bit as part of a leadership intensive that was going on there. And in the midst of that, we were telling this story about what we've been doing as a church to leave an impression, to leave an impact. So that if there ever came a day when Lifeline was no longer around, that there would be an impression, that there would be a legacy, that there would be an imprint that would never be forgotten. There's a question that I was telling them that I began to wrestle with years ago in ministry and leading in the church realm, and it was this. The question was, if our church ceased to exist, would anybody outside of us know? Would anybody know? Would anybody care? That begs to the question of legacy. What are you doing to leave an imprint, a legacy, a mark behind? What is it that you're doing to make a long impression after you're gone, long after we're off the face of this earth? So the question for us today is, how do we leave a lasting legacy? One of the ironies of life is that success, just being a success, is no guarantee that people will remember you. Because here's what happens. The moment you set a goal and then you achieve that goal, then what happens is somebody else is going to come along and they're going to achieve that goal. They're going to surpass that goal. And now that first goal is forgotten about. We see that happen in sports all the time. If you're in sales, you see that happening in sales. You hit a sales mark, and then somebody else is going to come along and they're going to hit that mark and they're going to exceed that mark. And now you're no longer the top dog. You're yesterday's news. So success doesn't ensure that you're going to have a legacy. But what does is significance. It's not about success. It's about significance. Success also doesn't satisfy ultimately. So it's the same deal about reaching goals. That's why you reach a certain goal and you think, okay, I did it. And then what do we do next? You set another goal because it's like that's good for a little while. You chomp on that for a little bit and it's satisfying for a little while. But eventually that becomes hollow and empty again, and you're looking for something else. You're looking for a next level. You're looking for another goal. You have to go after another challenge. It's never enough. So we need to move from focusing on success in life as our primary goal to moving on towards significance in our lives. Now, I want you to get this. This is the main big idea that I want you to walk away with today. That we need to understand the difference between success and living for success, and move our lives towards shifting our focus on significance as our primary goal of life. And here's what will happen, is that when you do that, you will leave a legacy that will outlast long after you're gone. That's true for you, that's true for me, that's true for Lifeline Church. So the question that we want to ask today is, what kind of legacy are we building in our own lives? I want you to think this through on your own life, in your own individual life. And then I also want us to think it through collectively as a Lifeline family. What is the impact? What kind of legacy are we building as a Lifeline Church? Many of you may be familiar with a man named Bob Buford. Bob Buford wrote a book, became a bestseller a few years ago, called Halftime. Changing your game plan from success to significance. That was the whole premise of his book. He said you get to a point in your life and you want to move from success to significance, and that was something that he was experiencing, and so he wanted to write about it to help other people in that process. And he uses a metaphor about football, so you can understand how devastated I was that we didn't have church last week, because I built the whole message around that. In fact, I was just going to go ahead and continue with the message that I was going to talk about last week, 10 reasons why Seattle will win the Super Bowl, and I just thought, I probably shouldn't talk about it this week. I'll just probably leave that message and go on with the new one. But for most of us, our legacy, if you think about it in a football game, most of us, the first half of our life is based on forming a family. We're trying to form a family. We consider about whether we're going to get married, we're capable of getting married, we have kids, whether we're going to have children or not, whether we're going to have one child or multiple child. We're thinking about making our mark on the world. That's the first half of our lives. And oftentimes in that first half of life, you're so focused on those things that there's no time for spiritual things. There's no time for thoughts about kingdom building. Kingdom building. It's about the intensity of working long, hard hours and getting our success and getting our own and building our lives. That's oftentimes for people in that 70 average years that we live. That's oftentimes what that first 35, 40 years are all about. It's just about forming family, forming our lives, making our mark on the world, figuring out what we're gonna do and kind of be known, and we're trying to make ourselves a success. And there's almost no time left for things that matter beyond that. We don't really But then when it happens, and Bob Buford points this out in his book, he said there's a time that comes and it's different for everybody. Some it may start at 35 and maybe 40, maybe 45, somewhere in that range. What typically happens is that there comes a time in our lives where we come off of the field, to use his metaphor, and we reconsider the priorities and the game plan for the part 2 of our lives. What are we going to do with the second half of our lives? And so for many people, their life just consists of waking up in the morning, going to work, working really hard, making some money, coming back home, going to sleep, waking up the next day, going to work, working long, hard hours, going back home, and that just happens over and over again, and that's about it. We become so consumed with success that we don't take time to think about our significance. I want to challenge you to do that. I want to challenge you to be different. I want to challenge you to push back on that the way the rest of the world tends to go. I want to challenge you to ask the question, if my life really worked, if it was really working at the level that I wanted to work, what would the elements of that be? What would that look like? How would that be fleshed out? See, significance is something that is deep down within you, that's been trying to get out your whole life. It's there. God birthed it in you. He birthed significance. All of us were born significant. We were born with God-given significance inside of us. And what happens is it becomes like an archaeological experiment where we have to start sifting through that and brushing away all the other things that are superfluous, all those other things that are just kind of getting in the way, hiding, burying oftentimes that significance. And so we have to discover something buried, something that's been there all along. And I think that God encodes each of us with DNA. Of course, we talk about that all the time. There is physical DNA that determines whether you're going to be blonde or brunette, whether you're going to have blue eyes or brown eyes, or whether you're going to be a male or female. All of those things get determined, but there is also a spiritual DNA, as you know, we talk about, that has more to do with our sense of destiny, has more to do with our sense of calling or a specific mission in life. It's the purpose that is ours, and it is ours alone. And God says, I have birthed that DNA in you as well. And the challenge for today that I want us to focus on the next few minutes is to begin to brush away some of the busyness, some of the activity, some of the stuff that has buried that significance, and let it come to the surface. And let's see what God wants to do in our lives, what He's wanted to do from the very moment that you were conceived. And He started birthing in you from the very, very beginning. And so I want you to jot some of these things down. I want to give you some rules to significance. As we go down this pathway towards significance, what are some things that we need to take under consideration? Here's the first one. The first one is that it starts with yourself. You have to start with you. The very first step for figuring out the second half of your life, or just your significance in life, you certainly don't have to wait until you're halfway through life. The challenge for you is to begin to discover what God created you for, what you individually, specifically were designed for. That there are no two people alike, that everybody is different. There are ways that we are different physically, there are ways that we're different psychologically. None of us have the same spiritual coding either. There are differences among all of us that God has birthed uniquely, gifts, spiritual gifts that He has given each of you differently than other people in this room. And I feel certain that God's not going to hold you accountable for my spiritual gifts, just as equally as I'm confident that I'm not going to be held accountable for your spiritual gifts. That's on you. God birthed that in you, and He expects you to use it and get it into the game. I think when I show up in heaven, He's going to say, Dave, what did you do with what I gave you to work on? He's not going to say, what did you do with what I gave Joel to work on? It's going to be, what did you do with what I gave you? That's the first thing. It begins with yourself. Here's the second thing on this road to significance, is that you have to define, or maybe even change, what your primary loyalty is. What is it that is your primary loyalty in life? Now, Bob Buford, in his book, he recounts an interaction that he had with a guy who wasn't a Christian, wasn't a Christ follower, was living on a different value plane, but it was somebody that had been successful in his business life and successful in his personal life enough to know that he was kind of a coach. And so Bob Buford hired him as a coach to come in and help him to think through his second half of his life. Help me to be successful. Help me to be significant in the second half of my life. And so this guy was just a brilliant, genius level person, and he was really great at being ruthlessly incisive about looking at other people and kind of sifting through what's important and what's really there. Very insightful person. And so this guy says to Bob Buford, he said, he takes out a piece of paper and he draws a box on that piece of paper. So picture this in your mind. Draw a box on the piece of paper, and he says to Bob, he says, the way I'm doing planning, the way I'm helping people through a process like this these days, is that I'm asking individuals, I'm asking even corporations, as I'm working in the business world, what's in your box? What is it that is in your box? In other words, what is the main thing? What is it that drives this corporation? What is it that drives you as a person? And so he has this interchange going on with Bob. He says, Bob, one of the things I've noticed is I've been listening to you and I've been observing you and I've been following you and watching the way you live your life and what's important to you right now. There's a couple things that come to my mind. He said, as I'm looking at you, what I've learned is that what's in that box, what's in your box, is either Jesus Christ or it's money. It's one of those two things. Those are the two things that you talk about the most, that you work toward the most, that are always in all the conversations. So what he did is on that piece of paper, in that little box, on one side of the box he drew a cross, and on the other side of the box he drew a dollar sign. And he said, now you have to tell me what's going to be in your box. If you can tell me which one of those two things goes in your box, then I can help you with your strategic planning. I can help you get to the next step. I can help you with all the planning implications of that. But if you can't tell me what is the primary focus of your life, the primary loyalty of your life, then you're just going to oscillate back and forth between those two things. You're going to oscillate between those two values. In fact, that's what you've been doing as I've observed you all along. You keep going back. God's most important, money's most important, God's most important, money's most important. And he says, if you can't figure out what is in the box, then you don't know what your number one is, what your primary loyalty is. So after a long pause, Bob said, put Christ in the box. Because here's what I know, that is what is eternal. Money comes and goes. I have good days, I have bad days. The market's up, the market's down. Real estate is up, real estate is down. Yesterday's bank president is parking your car today in front of some restaurant. It can happen like that. And he said, making that decision and being very clear about that and identifying that, calling it what it is, what his primary loyalty is, set the direction for the rest of his life. He said it didn't change everything. It's not like it upset everything in his life because it was a loyalty. It just hadn't really been clarified as a prominent primary loyalty of his life. But he said it established that from that point on. And so he began to look at his job. He began to look at his company. He looked at his business as a platform rather than an end. It was a means to an end. It was not the end in and of itself. Does that make sense? You can exchange it with anything that you want. I don't know what it is that's on either side of your box. Maybe there's things on all corners of your box. You say, I haven't really decided yet what my primary loyalty is. And what this consultant would say to you, as he said to Bob Buford, was, until you define what that primary loyalty is, and he would Bob Buford takes the next step. He says, not just define it, but if Jesus Christ is not the center, whatever else you got in there is not going to last, because that is the only thing that matters for eternity. Third rule of significance, moving from success to significance, is to take some small step. Just take some step. Just move in some direction. Just don't sit back and say, I don't know where to go. There's so many big things, big changes that I need to make in your life. He would say to you, just take some small step. And if you look on your handout that we gave you today, there's a list of things that are in Bob Buford's book. There's 8 different ones, I think. There's 8 different possible little minor next steps that you can take. And those might be there might be something in there that you say, that's a next step for me. That's a little baby step that I can take. That will move me a little bit closer toward my goal. So he says, just take some small step. God uses, listen to this, God uses moving objects. I had a mentor of mine years ago who used to say all the time, you can't be led if you're not moving. God can't lead you if you're not moving in some direction. That when you're just fixed and you're just locked in one place, which is often what we do, we say, God, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do next. Where are you going to take me next? And we wait for him to move us, but that's not the way God works. He works when we start walking, we start moving, and then he may say, no, a little bit to the left. No, I want you to head over here. No, you've gone far enough that way. I want you to veer back this way. And he will guide you as you're moving, as you're walking, as you're taking a step. But that's the key. You have to be moving. Now, the last step is if you want to change the nature of your life, you may have to renegotiate the relationships in your life. If you're going to move from success as your focus to significance as your focus, there will be implications in your relational world that you're probably going to have to go back and renegotiate. You're going to have some dialogue about what that means, what the implications of that are. Because when you change you, and you change and you define your primary loyalty, you're changing the makeup of who you are as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a business partner, as an employee of your company. You have changed who you are. And so that may have implications in various elements of your life. And it's not easy, and it will take time. But you have to begin to acclimate yourself and the people around you to your new temperature. And just by the way, I think this is why it's so difficult oftentimes for people that are new Christ followers, people that make a new commitment to God, and they say, I want to start following, I don't know all the implications, I don't know what all that means, but I want to begin to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And they start off thinking it's going to be so easy because they feel so good when they make that decision, but then they get discouraged and shut down oftentimes because the people in their lives don't understand the new orientation of their life. And that impacts your family, it impact your marriage, certainly will impact your friends, will impact your co-workers. And it's difficult to acclimate to a new climate. And if you start out thinking that, hey, I'm in this for the long haul, it's going to take time, it's going to take some energy that I'm going to have to work through some of this, then what happens is that even though you're saying, I know this is going to be hard, I know this is going to take time, it isn't going to happen overnight, then what happens is the likelihood of your success over a long period of time is increased greatly. You're going to be able to stay in the game a lot longer if you think, I'm in this for 4 quarters, I'm in this for the whole deal. This isn't just a little whim decision that I'm making. I am reorienting the direction of your life. In order to get to the promised land, it requires a strong alternative vision. That's the thing that you're going to work on for years and years and years to come, but you have to be committed to that over the long haul. So you say, well, why would anybody want to do that? Why would you want to reorient your life? If you had something else in your box other than God, why would anybody want to go through the hassle? If you're saying that in order to take out whatever's in there, if it isn't God, and to put God in the middle, that it's going to upset everything around me, it's going to impact all of my relationships, I'm going to have to renegotiate that. People aren't going to understand my new orientation of life. If that's what's coming, why would I even bother? Why would I even go through that hassle? Why would I go through that headache? There's a payoff. There's a payoff for it. There's a couple payoffs, actually. And instead of being a taker, what happens is you focus on being a giver. You've changed kind of the flow of your life. Here's the first payoff. The first payoff is that there's fulfillment in here and now. It makes a difference in your life right now. I've shared this before, that growing up in the church, we used to sing songs, and we used to talk an awful lot about heaven, about what it was going to be like someday. And I remember thinking, like, well, what about now? Isn't there a payoff now? And absolutely, in Mark 8:35, it says, only those who give away their lives for my sake, for the sake of the good news, will ever know what it really means to live. This is a fulfillment of what Jesus was talking about in John 10:10 when he said, this is why I came, that you might have life to the full, that you would have fulfillment, you would have satisfaction, you would have significance in your life. And that's not just when you die and go to heaven. That's here, right now, 2015, wherever you're living, here in McHenry County, this is for us. He says, only if you give your life away will you really know what it means to really live. that God wired the universe in such a way that you don't find happiness in getting, in figuring out what you can stockpile. That's not where happiness comes from. That's not where significance comes from. You find happiness in giving your life away, in reversing the engine, and reversing the flow from being a taker to being a giver. See, what matters in life is not how long you live. Doesn't matter if you get those 25,550 days or not, or if you get significantly less than that. Because if you live to be 150 years old, but you live in a selfish way, who cares? I mean, what impact does that? What difference does that really make? You double how long you're just taking from people. Who cares? What matters is not the duration of your life. What matters is the donation of your life. What you're investing in the lives of things that matter for eternity. It doesn't matter if you live to be 15 or 50 or 500. If you don't do anything with your life, if you don't invest your life, if you just spend those days, then who cares? Well, why would you even want any more? Why would God say, oh, I want to bless this person with more life so they can make it more about them? If you don't make your life count, why do you deserve to live even one more year? But when you shift your focus from focusing on what can I get out of life, what can I squeeze out of this life, to what can I give back, how can I make the people around me better, how can I lift the tide of the people around me, how can I add value into the lives of other people, then you move from success being the goal of your life, which is mostly about getting, and you move toward your life being about significance as the goal of your life. And when you do that, the payoff is you find real fulfillment. You find real joy. You find real contentment. You find real peace. And you know why? Because that's how God wired us. That's how you're made. That's how you were created by your Creator. Give your life away to a cause that is greater than yourself. And there's no greater cause than to do what God put you on this earth to do. There's anything. I unapologetically call you, challenge you, berate you, whatever I need to do, cajole you, hoodwink you, into giving your life to that which matters for eternity. That's called the kingdom of God. That's what that's all about. That's what that is. Not investing in the temporary, but investing in the eternal. That's what you were made for. That's what you were shaped for. And what happens is, in return, you get fulfillment. You get to experience what we started this Life-Flying Church for. That people would experience life to the full. But there's another reward that happens. There's another payoff, and that is not just the here and now, but there is, in fact, an eternal reward. So those songs that we sing about in the early church, as I grew up in, the songs about heaven, when we all get to heaven, when we all get to heaven, those songs were not wrong. It's just part two of the equation. It's part two of the payoff. God's not going to reward you in heaven on the basis of your success, on how much you've accumulated. When you stand before God, He's not going to say, hey, did you bring your checkbook? Because I kind of want to see, I'm going to need to see the statements for the last 3 months. So I just want to see how you're doing, how you ended up. No, He's not doing a financial audit of your life that way. He's going to do a significance audit of your life. He could care less about your bank account balance. He wants to know, what did you do with your life? You may spend 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years here, but you're going to spend millions and millions of years on the other side of eternity. We're just on one side of eternity right now. And what happens is, the Bible describes that God is watching what we do with this side of eternity. He's watching very carefully. And He's wanting to see, what are you going to do with this life, this short period of time that I give you? What are you doing with that? And what you do with that period of time will determine what your reward on the eternal side of that equation is. What that payoff is along those lines. Look what it says in Matthew 25. It says, the master, in Matthew 25, 23, says, the master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things, so I'm going to put you in charge of many things. Come, share your master's happiness. It talks about these eternal rewards. There's a reward of just this commendation. Wouldn't you like to hear from God? Well done. Nice job. Think about how great that is when somebody says that to you. After you've been working hard on something, you've been really focused on something, and they just come along and they say, put their arm around you and say, "Attaboy, and a girl, that's a nice job." So he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's one reward. Commendation. Then he says, "You have been faithful with a few things. I'm going to put you in charge of many things." A lot of people think that when they get to heaven, they think when you get to heaven that the first line that you get in is your robes line. You know, you go in and you're going to get your white robe. Then the next line is your wings. You get your wings. You know, you got to stand in line for that and check them out. You're going to have them for all of eternity. And your ID and a valid driver's license and a major credit card, that kind of thing. You know, to hold that. You're not going to get wings in heaven. You're not going to be an angel when you get to heaven. That's a cartoon version. That isn't what heaven is all about. When you get to heaven, He's going to look at how faithful you have been to things of this earth. He's going to give you a job for all of eternity. He's going to say, I've entrusted you with a little bit of responsibility here on earth, but now that you're going to be with me for all of eternity, based on what you did there, here's what I'm going to give you now. You get a promotion. This is just a little temporary job. You get a promotion when you've been faithful and responsible with the little. He will make you responsible with even greater things in the future. When you get to heaven, I want God to say, "Dave, you took what I gave you, and it didn't matter how small it was, didn't matter what it was, you took what I gave you. I determined what I gave you. You took that, and you did something with it. You invested in it. You poured yourself into that. And because of that, I'm going to give you greater responsibility, because I know that you can be trusted with a little, so I'm going to trust you with a lot." I want to hear him say that. I want you to hear him say that as well. But there's another reward. He says, not only will he just say, "Hey, well done, attaboy. Hey, based on what you did, here's what your reward is going to be." But it also says, "Welcome to my celebration." When you're faithful with what he's done, and you've invested in it, you've been responsible with it, he says, "Come and share your master's happiness." Come. All this that you see here. As far as the eye can see, God will say, "This is yours too. Come, share this happiness. Share this party. Share this celebration. Because what's mine is yours." This is part of the reward. This is part of the payoff of investing in your life in things that matter for eternity. Let's suppose that Congress were to pass a law this week that said in the next 12 months, we're going to change the currency from the American dollar to the Japanese yen. We're just going to change our whole monetary system. We're going to start working on that. They said sometime in the next 12 months. Now, to be fair with everybody, we're not going to tell you exactly when that's going to take place. But just know that it's coming. And at some point, your American dollars will no longer be valid, and you will have to have Japanese yen. Now imagine if that was the case, and that edict came down. What would you do? I tell you what you would do. You would start investing, getting as much Japanese yen as you possibly could right now. You would make sure that you transfer your money into you would convert it into that currency. And then you would keep just a little bit of the currency for now, for yourself, to make sure that you were fed and clothed and taken care of, that you had what you needed. Because you didn't know when that was going to change over. You just knew that it was coming. Then when it came, whatever you had that was left over that was just temporary, all right, no big deal. Now you've invested and you've got the rest of your currency already ready to go for the future currency. That's exactly what you would do. That's the same thing what happens in our lives in heaven. Jesus says, one day, some unexpected day, I'm telling you it's coming. I am not telling you exactly when it's going to happen. I'm telling you it's coming, that you will be done with your time here on earth. It could be tomorrow. It could be 50 years from now. It could be next month. It could be next year. But the moment that you check out, that exchange date happens. And when you go into eternity, all of the wealth that you had here on earth, all of your assets, all of your bank accounts will be worthless in your new economy. And the only way that what you have now can count in eternity is if you begin converting it now into the currency of heaven. Jesus calls this laying up your treasures in heaven, storing up for eternity, investing in eternity, not in the here and now. And he says everybody ought to do that because it's coming. It's going to happen. Don't store up here now where you're going to lose it all. That you got a big stockpile, but as soon as that exchange date comes, it's all gone. I know you've heard the expression that you can't take it with you, and it's true. You cannot take it with you. You never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. When people die, you can buy their burial suit at a mortuary. The difference with funeral suits is that they don't have pockets in them. Because you don't need pockets where you're going. You can't take it with you. But you can send it on ahead. And you send it on ahead by investing in God's purposes here and now. And I would suggest it. Knowing that there is a day, there's going to be a day of exchange in your life, that you start transferring your assets now. You start transferring your assets of your abilities and of your time and of your talents and of your resources, of your money, of everything into things that are going to count for eternity. God's kingdom. Rather than keeping it tied up in a worthless economy. Because they won't be worth anything once your life is over. So God says, what is in your box? What's in your box? Are you going to put a dollar sign in your box? Or are you going to put a cross in your box? Or are you going to put some other person in your box? What's going to be the main thing in your life? My challenge to you is to make the rest of your life the best of your life by moving from success to significance and use your life the way God intended you to live. Now today, what we wanted to do is just to take a couple minutes. I just want to give you a little picture, just a thumbnail, quick sketch, not a lot of detail. But I just want you to think about what we're doing as a church to prepare for eternity. What we're doing to prepare to make an impact, to make a lasting impression where we are, to prepare for future generations, to grow forward. And the big idea of that is that we are going to invest this year in building our house. This is our house. This is our family. We're going to invest in building our community in order for us to be able to reach our community. So this year in October, we'll be celebrating 5 years as a church. 5 years that we've been doing this. And there have been ups and there have been downs. But we're going to invest in building our community so that we can go to the next level. Because what's happened in our church, and what happens in all new churches, is that you build for a little bit and you kind of invest out. Now they don't go exactly like this. It isn't just like a 1-2, 1-2. They often kind of go in cycles and they go hand in hand a little bit. But the predominant energy oftentimes begins by building a community of people, casting vision. Here's what we're here to do. This is what we're all about. And then we leverage that community in order to reach our greater community. And that's exactly what we did 5 years ago. And then after we built and reached out to that community, we started building and investing a little bit more in that community with the idea of we want to now go and reach our community with our new, bigger, better built, stronger family. Does that make sense? And then we did that again. And we do that again. Now, in the last year or so, I'm just being honest and transparent, we haven't really done it. We haven't focused on that the way we need to focus on it. That's going to happen this year. This year we are focusing on building our community here, strengthening our church family, strengthening who we are, strengthening that community so that we can cycle it back up to then build and launch to a larger community and reach our community around us. There's a couple ways that we're going to do that. There's a lot of ways. I'm going to share just a couple. One of the things that we're going to do to make sure that we're all on the same page, make sure that everybody understands what we're investing in together, we're going to begin a Life Path series. And it's going to be a series of message series. We're going to talk about some 101 level types of things. What does it mean to live out our spiritual DNA? And we're going to talk about how do you grow in your spiritual maturity? How do you grow to use the tools of Bible study and prayer and giving and serving and all those types of things to help you to grow and to strengthen yourself. And we're going to do 300 level things where we're going to talk about how do you figure out, identify what your resources are, what your spiritual gifts are that God has wired inside of you, to do a little archaeological digging and to figure out what's always been there that you need to release and let it come alive. That's the 300 level stuff. And then we're going to talk about 400 level stuff. What can you do? What is your responsibility? What is your level of engagement in advancing Jesus' mission and helping us to reach the greater community? We were going to start them as a class series and invite you to them. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to bring the class to you. We're going to walk through these things together over the course of the next few months. We've already begun planning on putting all that together. We're going to invest this year in a renewed, refocused way on our kids and on our youth. We're going to focus this year on our families. It's one of the key ways that we're going to invest in this community, and we have to do it in our own families. So we're going to invest in one another that way as the cornerstone of our community. And we're going to be talking about our facility. We're going to be talking about where do we go next. This is not an end. This is a means to an end. So what's the next step for us? We're going to talk seriously about what that looks like. And we're going to prepare to increase our influence in this community. You know, for the first 2.5 years as a church, we said we want to be a catalytic influence for transforming the spiritual landscape of the community. And we talked about that and taught that and talked about it and taught that. But we didn't really have a hook. Like, what is that going to look like and how are we going to do that? And then we started really focusing in on 7 key areas of influence in our community. That came out of a trip that I was on in Guatemala with John Maxwell a couple of years ago. In fact, I was on a phone call with John Maxwell last week, 2 weeks ago. And I had an opportunity to say to him, John, if you could come to Lifeline and speak to our church family, what would you say to us? And he had an interesting response. And I want you to take just about 4 minutes, and I want you to hear that little exchange. Take a listen to this.
Area code 847-910. This is Paul.
Paul, John, this is Dave Rudine from outside Chicago. And
hey, Dave.
How are you? I think you probably have answered some of my question already, because I've heard some great things coming up about, particularly in the church realm. I had a mentor early on in my life that said, you can't be led if you're not moving. And you know, then I joined the John Maxwell team.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Do
it afraid. And develop wings on the way, that kind of thing. So we planted a new church a couple years ago with what I believe was a God-given dream to be a catalyst for transforming the spiritual landscape of our community. That's what we've taught. That's what we've shared for 2.5 years. Not really knowing how we were going to do that or what that would look like, but just felt like this is what we needed to do. Then the JMT comes into my life, and then specifically Guatemala. And in Guatemala, and that whole trip, we learned about the 7 key streams of influence. And what that did is it gave me a hook to hang that vision on of that's how we were going to transform the community through business and education and government and media and arts and faith and family. My question is, we're coming up this weekend with our Vision Weekend as a church. And I'm wondering what you would say to help me help our congregation to get that, to grasp that. And I'm wondering what you've learned about the 7 key areas of influence and how you've seen that play out in transforming a community, and what you would say to a church to cast vision for raising up leaders like that, to go beyond just one person saying that and doing that to many.
Dave, what are you doing on February 9th, 10th, and 11th? Here's why I ask. I'm doing at John Maxwell Leadership Center in Atlanta, a Salt and Light Conference. And we've given out by just invitation. I didn't want everyone there, so we did a personal invitation list, of which we'll have about 600 people come to this conference. The people that are going to be at this conference are some of the finest movers and shakers, transformational leaders in the country. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be leading. It's an equipped conference. And when I hear you talking about what you're talking right now, at 7 streams, we are going to be giving every pastor there a kit that basically has not only sermons, but roundtables, small group lessons, and outreach roundtables to be salt light in the 7 streams. And if you can get here, if you're free, Dave, if you're free on those dates, on February 9, 10, 11, I want you to sign up, register for the Salt Light Conference and come and be up here. What I really want to say is tell your congregation you're going to do this in about 3 weeks, because when you leave, you will have all of the resources and all of the strategy you'll need to do the 7 streams.
Wow.
There you go.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So,
All right.
can you get there?
I'm looking at my calendar right now, and I think
Okay.
I'll just find a way to do it.
Yeah, go to iequip.org and tell them you want to register for the Salt and Light Conference, and tell them that I gave you that invitation. Okay?
Okay. We'll do.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Chris.
much.
You're welcome.
Tomorrow morning at 9:30, I'll be on a plane down to Atlanta to meet with John and a team of pastors. Talk about things that are going to directly impact what we do this year and for years to come. It's just an answer to prayer. I could go on. That morning, Thursday morning when that happened, the folks at Ignite Church Planting that helped us get started, they did a nationwide prayer day focused on us. And that morning, about 7:38 in the morning, they interviewed me and went out to others around the country that were praying for us specifically and what our next steps are, where we're going. It was that afternoon that I had that conversation that evening with John. I just say that because I think that God is up to something, and we need to be ready for it. We need to be prepared for the next steps, and that includes all of us in a lot of different ways. The way that we add value to people in this community begins by us, first of all, just valuing people, making ourselves more valuable, learning and growing and figuring out what those next steps are, knowing what other people find valuable and how we can relate to them, and then doing the things that God values. The things that God values are people, our family. So we're going to focus on that like we've never done before this year. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to ask you to be all in on doing that, be a part of making that happen. I want you to begin praying. We're going to have conversations about what that looks like and the environment that we're trying to create here, and how God will use us and move us to the next level. Now, I've talked way longer than I intended to today. So I'm going to just close this out, and I'm going to close this with a word of prayer.